Commander Zeth Ka clicked his mandibles in amusement as he studied the holographic display of the third planet. Green patches covered most of the land masses, interrupted by brown mountain ranges and blue waterways. His crimson eyes glowed with contempt as he examined what the humans called Earth. Primitive vegetation everywhere, he muttered to his aide, Lieutenant Vex Ra. These humans hide behind trees and bushes like frightened insects. No wonder they lost every battle against proper civilized forces. The hegemony had conquered 47 star systems in the past decade. Each victory had been swift and decisive. Advanced energy weapons, orbital bombardment platforms, and mechanized assault units had crushed resistance within days, sometimes hours. The pattern never changed. Inferior species would mount brief, hopeless defenses before surrendering to superior technology and tactics. Earth should have followed the same pattern. The humans possessed crude projectile weapons, primitive aircraft, and ground vehicles that barely qualified as military equipment. Their cities had fallen quickly to the initial assault. New York, London, Tokyo, and Moscow now flew hegemony banners. The human governments had formally surrendered 3 months ago, but something strange was happening in the green zones. "Sir," Lieutenant Vex Ra approached with a data pad. "We've received another report from Colonel Marex To's division. They've lost another convoy in the Amazon region." Zeth Ka's mandibles stopped clicking. "Lost how? Mechanical failure?" "No, sir. Enemy action. The humans are still fighting in these wilderness areas." "Impossible." Zeth Ka snatched the data pad. "The human military surrendered. Their chain of command is broken. What forces could still be operating?" The report made little sense. A supply convoy of 6 hovering transports had vanished while crossing dense forest terrain. The escort included 2 gunships armed with plasma cannons. Search teams found wreckage scattered across several kilometers. Burn marks on trees suggested intense fighting, but no human bodies were recovered. No human vehicles were found. The attackers had simply melted back into the green hell that covered this continent. "These must be scattered remnants," Zeth Ka decided. "Desperate survivors with stolen equipment. Order Colonel Marex II to sweep the area with heavy weapons. Burn out every hiding spot." "Sir, the Colonel already tried that approach. He reports the vegetation is too dense for effective targeting. His forces can't see more than a few meters in most directions. The humans seem to know exactly where we are, but our sensors can't penetrate the forest canopy." Zeth Ka studied the tactical display more carefully. The green zones showed dozens of similar incidents across multiple continents. Convoys ambushed, patrols disappearing, supply depots hit by phantom attacks. The humans called these areas jungles, forests, swamps, and mountains, places where their primitive world had not been properly civilized. "Summon Colonel Marex II for immediate consultation," Zeth Ka ordered. "I want a full tactical assessment of these wilderness zones." 3 hours later, Colonel Marex II stood at attention in the command center. His usually pristine armor was scratched and dirty. Burn marks scored his chest plate. His expression showed something Zeth Ka had never seen in a hegemony officer before: uncertainty. "Report, Colonel." "Sir, we face an enemy unlike any we've encountered. They don't fight like civilized forces. No formations, no fixed positions, no supply lines we can target. They appear from nowhere, strike hard, and vanish completely. You're describing bandits, not an army." "With respect, sir, these aren't bandits. The attacks are coordinated, simultaneous strikes across hundreds of kilometers, precise timing, expert use of terrain. Someone is commanding these forces, and that someone understands warfare at a level we haven't seen from humans before." Zeth Ka pulled up reconnaissance footage from the latest incident. Thermal imaging showed hegemony vehicles moving through dense forest. Suddenly, explosions erupted from multiple directions. The feed went static. "What weapons are they using?" "Primitive projectile weapons mostly, but modified for jungle conditions. explosive charges hidden in trees, camouflaged mines, some kind of chemical weapons that corrode our armor. And, sir, Mirex too hesitated. They're using the environment itself as a weapon. Explain. They channel water to create floods that wash out our positions. They bring down massive trees to block our advance routes. They use indigenous animal species to detect our movements and carry explosive devices. Yesterday, a swarm of local flying creatures attacked our patrol. Each creature carried a small incendiary device that activated on contact with our equipment. Zethka stared at his subordinate. You're telling me that animals are conducting military operations? No, sir. Humans are conducting military operations using animals as tools. They've turned the entire wilderness into a weapon system. The implications were disturbing. Hegemony doctrine assumed that victory came through superior technology and firepower, but these wilderness zones seemed immune to conventional assault. Orbital bombardment was ineffective against targets that moved constantly and hid under thick canopy. Mechanized units couldn't operate in terrain that had no roads or clear firing lanes. Even air support struggled with dense vegetation that could hide entire enemy formations. What do intelligence reports tell us about these forces? Very little, sir. Captured human civilians claim they don't know anything about organized resistance. They call the fighters special forces or rangers or jungle warriors. Apparently, these humans specialize in wilderness combat, but the civilians insist they're just normal soldiers, not superhuman or enhanced in any way. Normal soldiers don't vanish like ghosts. Sir, I've been thinking about that. We fought 47 different species. All of them developed civilized technology before achieving spaceflight. They built cities, roads, industrial complexes. They cleared their wilderness areas for agriculture and development. But humans are different. Zethka waited for elaboration. Large portions of Earth remain wild. Humans deliberately preserved wilderness areas even after developing advanced technology. They have entire military units that train specifically for combat in these environments. While we perfected urban warfare and space combat, humans perfected something we never considered necessary: fighting in places where technology gives limited advantage. The analysis was troubling. Hegemony forces excelled at destroying cities, industrial centers, and military bases. But wilderness had no infrastructure to target, no command centers to capture, no supply depots to destroy. The enemy could be anywhere and nowhere. Recommendations? We need to adapt our tactics, sir. Send smaller units, troops on foot instead of vehicles. Focus on stealth and patience instead of overwhelming firepower. Impossible. Hegemony doctrine is based on technological superiority. We don't skulk through bushes like primitives. Then we may have to accept that these zones will remain hostile indefinitely. Zethka dismissed the colonel and studied the tactical situation alone. The green zones covered approximately 60% of Earth's land masses. If they remained under human control, the conquest would be incomplete. Worse, they could serve as bases for expanding resistance movements. He opened communication channels to nearby star systems. I need additional forces for planetary pacification operations. What kind of forces? Came the reply from Fleet Admiral Kexvo. Send me the Crimson Legions and the siege specialists from the Mordak campaign. That's over 50,000 troops plus heavy equipment. Are the humans mounting a counteroffensive? Something like that. 3 weeks later, massive transport ships descended through Earth's atmosphere. The Crimson Legions were the hegemony's elite assault forces. They had broken the mountain fortresses of Kepler 442b and stormed the crystal cities of Wolf 359c. Their weapons could melt through any known armor. Their tactics had crushed every enemy the hegemony had faced. Zethka watched the deployment with satisfaction. Surely this overwhelming force would end the wilderness problem quickly. The first major assault targeted the Amazon basin. 2 full divisions advanced into the green hell with every advantage technology could provide. Advanced scanning equipment, energy weapons, armored vehicles, air support, and orbital overwatch. Nothing could hide from their sensors. Nothing could withstand their firepower. For the first day, everything went according to plan. The legions advanced steadily through the forest, destroying anything that moved. Thermal readings showed scattered human forces retreating deeper into the wilderness. On the second day, the advance slowed. Dense vegetation forced the troops into single-file columns. Vehicles bogged down in marshy ground. Air support was hampered by constant cloud cover and limited visibility. On the third day, the humans struck back. The attack came at dawn. Not the devastating assault Zeth-Ka expected, but something far worse. A whisper campaign of terror that picked apart his forces piece by piece. Sentries vanished without raising alarms. Equipment malfunctioned in impossible ways. Supply lines were cut by invisible enemies who left no traces. Troops reported seeing human faces in the shadows, but when backup arrived, nothing was there. "Sir," came Marexto's voice over the communicator, "the Crimson Legions are requesting immediate extraction." "Denied. They're the finest assault troops in the galaxy." "Sir, they've lost 30% of their strength without engaging the enemy in open combat. The humans are doing something to them psychologically. The troops are reporting that the forest itself is alive and hunting them." Zeth-Ka studied the tactical feeds. Elite soldiers were firing at shadows. Officers were requesting artillery strikes on empty clearings. Some units were advancing in the wrong direction, claiming their navigation equipment was malfunctioning. "What exactly are these jungle warriors doing?" "We're not sure, sir. But whatever it is, it's working." The situation deteriorated rapidly. The Crimson Legions, who had never retreated from any battlefield, began abandoning positions without orders. Veteran commanders who had faced the most dangerous enemies in the galaxy were requesting reassignment to other campaigns. Within a week, the mighty assault force that was meant to crush human resistance was instead huddled in defensive positions, afraid to venture into the green zones that surrounded them on all sides. Zeth-Ka realized with growing horror that his technologically superior forces had encountered something they had never prepared for. An enemy that didn't fight by civilized rules. An enemy that turned nature itself into a weapon. An enemy that seemed to understand warfare in ways that made advanced technology irrelevant. For the first time in his military career, Commander Zeth-Ka began to wonder if the hegemony might actually lose a battle. Sergeant First Class Maria Santos crouched motionless behind a fallen log, her face painted with mud and plant matter that made her nearly invisible against the forest floor. Through the dense canopy above, she could hear the distinctive whine of alien hover vehicles approaching. Her team of 12 Rangers had been tracking this patrol for 6 hours, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. The hegemony forces had no idea they were being hunted. Maria pressed her throat mic and whispered in a voice barely louder than the morning breeze. "Ghost 6 to all teams. Package is entering the kill zone. Weapons tight until my mark." Acknowledgements came back in subtle hand signals from positions scattered throughout the jungle. To an outside observer, the forest appeared empty. But Maria's Rangers were everywhere, invisible predators who had turned this green hell into their personal hunting ground. The alien convoy consisted of 6 hover transports escorted by 2 gunships. Impressive firepower by any standard, enough to level a small city. But in the jungle, all that technology was more liability than advantage. The vehicles had to follow the one clear path through this section of forest. They couldn't see through the vegetation that pressed in from all sides. They couldn't detect the 12 humans who had been waiting in perfect silence for their arrival. Maria watched the lead gunship pass overhead, its pilot scanning uselessly through dense canopy. She smiled grimly. These aliens might rule the stars, but they had never learned to fight where the stars couldn't be seen. The convoy entered a natural bottleneck between 2 massive ceiba trees. Maria's team had spent 3 days preparing this site, turning it into a death trap that looked like untouched wilderness. Every fallen branch had been positioned with purpose. Every vine had been trained to grow in exactly the right direction. Even the sounds of birds and insects were part of the plan. "Execute," Maria breathed. The forest exploded into controlled chaos. Ranger Specialist Jake Morrison triggered the first surprise. Hidden charges brought down a massive tree directly onto the lead transport. The vehicle's energy shields flared briefly before collapsing under several tons of ancient hardwood. Alien crew members scrambled from the wreckage, only to find themselves facing an enemy they couldn't see. Corporal Lisa Chang opened fire from a position 30 meters away, her rifle modified with a sound suppressor and muzzle flash hider. The aliens spun toward the sound, but she was already gone, melting back into vegetation that closed around her like living camouflage. The gunships above tried to provide support, but their targeting systems couldn't distinguish between rangers and trees. Plasma bolts scorched harmlessly into empty jungle, while the humans they sought remained invisible. Maria's team moved through the forest like ghosts, striking and vanishing before the aliens could respond. Each ranger carried equipment specifically designed for this environment: lightweight weapons that wouldn't snag on vegetation, ammunition that performed well in high humidity, communications gear that could function despite heavy canopy interference. But more than equipment, they carried knowledge, understanding of how sound traveled through dense forest, awareness of which plants provided the best concealment at different times of day, instinctive feel for wind patterns and animal behavior that told them where enemies were moving before those enemies knew it themselves. Staff Sergeant Mike Rodriguez appeared behind an alien trooper like a deadly shadow. His combat knife, forged from high-carbon steel that wouldn't reflect light, found its target with surgical precision. The alien dropped without a sound, his plasma rifle clattering uselessly to the forest floor. The hegemony forces tried to establish a perimeter, but there was nothing to defend against. The humans weren't attacking from any particular direction. They were simply part of the jungle itself, emerging from the green hell whenever opportunity presented itself. Private First Class Ana Gutierrez had positioned herself in the canopy 40 feet above the battle. From her platform, constructed of woven branches and living vines, she could see the entire engagement. Her role was intelligence gathering and long-range precision fire. Through her rifle scope, she watched alien commanders trying desperately to coordinate a response to an enemy they couldn't locate. She selected her target carefully. An alien officer with elaborate insignia who seemed to be issuing orders through a communication device. One shot through the thick jungle air. The officer collapsed, his command structure collapsing with him. The aliens fired wildly into the forest, their advanced energy weapons carving glowing scars in ancient trees. But the Rangers were never where the aliens expected them to be. They flowed through the wilderness like water, impossible to grasp or pin down. Corporal Danny Reeves demonstrated the principle perfectly. He appeared from behind a massive buttress root, fired 3 precise shots that disabled an alien vehicle's propulsion system, then vanished into a tangle of thorny vines that would have been impassable to anyone who hadn't grown up exploring similar terrain in the Georgia swamps. The aliens tried to call for air support, but the dense canopy made precision strikes impossible. Orbital bombardment would have been equally useless. The Rangers were too scattered and too mobile to target effectively. "Ghost 6, this is Echo 2, came Chang's voice over the radio. "I count at least 15 enemy KIA. Remaining forces are in full retreat." Maria watched through her binoculars as surviving aliens abandoned their damaged vehicles and fled deeper into the forest. They had no idea they were running directly into another carefully prepared ambush site. "Let them go," she decided. "We'll track them to the secondary position and finish this properly." The Rangers began their pursuit with the patient intensity of apex predators. They moved through terrain that would have challenged experienced hikers, making no sound despite their speed. Each step was placed with deliberate care. Each breath was controlled to avoid creating vapor clouds in the humid air. The aliens crashed through the underbrush like panicked animals, leaving a trail that a blind tracker could follow. They had never learned to move quietly through dense vegetation. Their technology had always provided alternatives to stealth and patience. But in the jungle, stealth and patience were everything. 20 minutes later, the surviving aliens stumbled into a clearing that seemed to offer refuge. Open sky above, clear fields of fire, defensible positions behind fallen logs. It looked like a perfect place to regroup and call for extraction. It was also exactly where the Rangers wanted them to be. Maria's team had prepared this clearing months ago. Every apparent piece of cover was actually a concealed fighting position. Every escape route led into carefully prepared kill zones. What looked like natural terrain features were actually camouflaged obstacles designed to channel enemy movement into predetermined areas. The aliens never realized they had walked into a trap until it was too late. This time, the Rangers didn't bother with stealth. They emerged from concealment in a coordinated assault that demonstrated the full range of their capabilities. Morrison appeared from behind a camouflaged spider hole, his assault rifle speaking in controlled bursts that dropped 2 aliens before they could raise their weapons. Chang materialized from beneath a covering of leaves and moss, her shotgun devastating at close range. Rodriguez came through the trees like a human missile. Using a rope swing he had prepared weeks earlier, he landed behind the alien formation and attacked with the kind of close-quarters combat skills that turned knives and bare hands into deadly weapons. But it was Gutierrez who provided the most devastating demonstration of human jungle warfare. She had positioned herself in the upper canopy with a clear view of the entire clearing. Her sniper rifle, painted with patterns that matched the play of light and shadow through leaves, reached out to touch alien officers and specialists with surgical precision. The engagement was over in 3 minutes. 12 Rangers had eliminated an entire alien patrol without suffering a single casualty. Maria surveyed the battlefield with professional satisfaction. Bodies were scattered across the clearing, but already the jungle was beginning to reclaim them. Vines would grow over the alien equipment. Rain would wash away the blood. Within days, this would look like untouched wilderness again. "Strip the useful gear," she ordered her team. "Intel wants samples of their communication equipment and weapons. Demolitions, prepare charges to destroy anything we can't carry." The Rangers worked with practiced efficiency, salvaging alien technology while preparing to erase all evidence of the battle. They had learned to turn every engagement into an intelligence-gathering opportunity. Each captured device revealed more about alien capabilities and weaknesses. Chang held up an alien communication device. "Boss, this one's still active. We're getting real-time chatter from their command structure." Maria plugged in a translation module they had captured from an earlier engagement. Alien voices filled the clearing, speaking in urgent tones that needed no translation. "Multiple units requesting immediate extraction from wilderness zones. Crimson Legion reports 70% casualties from unknown causes. All patrols in jungle regions are declaring operational failure. Fleet Admiral is demanding explanation for continued resistance." Maria smiled as she listened to the growing panic in alien command channels. The mighty hegemony forces, who had conquered 47 star systems, were being systematically destroyed by a handful of humans who knew how to fight in places where starships couldn't go. "Go 6 to all teams," she transmitted. "Package delivered successfully. RTB for debriefing and resupply." The Rangers began their withdrawal with the same silent precision they had shown during the attack. They left no traces of their presence except for the tactical radio they had programmed to broadcast alien distress calls on hegemony frequencies. The device would continue transmitting false information for hours, adding to the confusion and fear that was spreading through enemy ranks. As they moved through the forest, Maria reflected on the larger strategic situation. The aliens controlled Earth's cities and industrial centers, but the wilderness belonged to humanity. Every jungle, every swamp, Every mountain range had become a fortress that alien technology couldn't breach. The Rangers weren't just conducting guerrilla warfare. They were demonstrating something the hegemony had never encountered before: humans who could turn any natural environment into a weapon. Soldiers who fought not just with advanced technology, but with understanding of terrain and tactics that went back thousands of years. Rodriguez jogged alongside her, his equipment carefully cleaned and maintained despite the harsh conditions. "How many does that make this week?" 17 patrols, 4 supply convoys, and 2 command posts, Maria replied. "Intelligence estimates we've eliminated over 300 enemy personnel just in this sector. The aliens are requesting reinforcements from other star systems. Let them come. There's room in this jungle for all the graves we need to dig." The Rangers disappeared into the green depths, leaving behind them a forest that looked peaceful and untouched. But Maria knew that appearances were deceiving. Hidden throughout these seemingly empty wilderness areas were hundreds of similar teams, each one a predatory pack of human warriors who had mastered the art of fighting where technology failed. The hegemony had made a critical mistake. They had assumed that conquering Earth meant controlling its cities and industrial centers. They had never considered that the planet's greatest strength might lie in the wild places they considered worthless. Now they were learning otherwise, one ambushed patrol at a time. Commander Zeth-Ka stared at the holographic casualty reports with growing disbelief. In 3 months of jungle warfare, the hegemony had lost over 15,000 troops. The mighty Crimson Legions had been reduced to scattered remnants hiding in fortified bases. Elite units that had conquered entire star systems were refusing to enter wilderness zones. "Sir," Lieutenant Vex Ra approached carefully. "Fleet Admiral Kexvo is demanding a full strategic review. High Command wants to know why a primitive planet is causing more casualties than the siege of Proxima Centauri." Zeth-Ka's mandibles clicked nervously. The siege of Proxima Centauri had lasted 2 years and cost the hegemony 30,000 troops. But that had been conventional warfare against an advanced technological civilization. This was supposed to be a simple pacification operation against defeated primitives. "What are the latest intelligence reports?" "The human resistance has expanded, sir. They're operating in jungle areas on 6 continents now. Our estimates suggest at least 10,000 active fighters, possibly more. They've established supply networks, training camps, and command structures throughout the wilderness zones." 10,000 fighters holding down our entire occupation force? "Yes, sir. But it's worse than that. The humans are starting to coordinate their wilderness operations with urban resistance cells. They're using jungle bases to launch raids on our city garrisons. Last week, they destroyed our main ammunition depot outside São Paulo using explosives transported through 50 kilometers of rainforest. Zeth-Ka studied the tactical displays with growing alarm. Red zones marked areas where hegemony forces could not operate safely. Those zones had expanded dramatically over the past month. Green zones showed confirmed human resistance activity. The green zones now covered almost 3/4 of the planet. Recommend immediate orbital bombardment of all wilderness areas. "Sir, we tried that approach 3 weeks ago. The bombardment caused massive ecological damage but eliminated virtually no resistance fighters. The humans simply moved deeper into cave systems and underground facilities we can't target effectively." "Underground facilities?" "Yes, sir. Intelligence suggests they've been preparing these wilderness positions for decades. Hidden bunkers, supply caches, communication networks, all camouflaged to look like natural terrain features. Our sensors can't distinguish between human facilities and geological formations." A new alarm sounded on the command center's displays. Vex Ra checked the incoming reports, and his expression grew troubled. "Sir, we have a priority alert from Colonel Mirex II. He's requesting immediate extraction for his entire division." "On what grounds?" "Total operational failure, sir. His forces are surrounded in the Congo Basin. They've been under continuous attack for 72 hours from an enemy they cannot locate or engage effectively. Zeth Ka opened the communication channel to Mirexto's position. Static filled the transmission, interrupted by the distant sound of weapons fire and what might have been alien screams. "Colonel, report your status." "Sir, we are combat ineffective," came Mirexto's strained voice. "The humans have turned this entire region into a weapon. They control every water source, every clear area, every potential landing zone. My troops are suffering from diseases we've never encountered. Our equipment is failing due to conditions we didn't anticipate, and the enemy—" He paused, and when he continued, his voice carried a note of fear that chilled Zeth Ka's ichor. "Sir, these aren't normal soldiers. They're something else entirely." "Explain." "They move through terrain that should be impassable. They appear and disappear like spirits. They know exactly where we are at all times, but we never see them until they choose to attack. Yesterday, one of my sentries reported seeing a human walk directly up a cliff face that was nearly vertical. Another patrol found evidence of human forces crossing a river by traveling underwater for over 2 kilometers. Zeth Ka frowned. "That's physically impossible for an unenhanced organic. Sir, I'm beginning to suspect these humans are enhanced in ways we don't understand, not with technology, but with something else. They seem to be perfectly adapted to wilderness conditions that are killing my troops." "Hold your position, Colonel. I'm sending reinforcements." "Sir, respectfully, more troops won't solve this problem. We need a completely different approach." The transmission cut to static as another wave of attacks struck Mirexto's beleaguered forces. Zeth Ka stared at the silent communication panel, his mind struggling to process what he was hearing. Across the planet, similar reports were coming in from every wilderness zone. Hegemony forces were being systematically hunted and destroyed by humans who seemed to possess capabilities that defied explanation. The jungle warriors weren't just winning individual battles. They were winning a war that the hegemony didn't know how to fight. "Sir," Vexra interrupted his thoughts, "we're receiving a transmission from the human resistance. They're requesting a meeting under flag of truce." "Impossible. We don't negotiate with primitives." "Sir, perhaps we should hear what they have to say. Our current approach isn't working." Zeth Ka considered the unthinkable possibility that the mighty hegemony might need to negotiate with a species they had already defeated. The thought was humiliating beyond measure. But the alternative appeared to be indefinite warfare against an enemy that seemed impossible to destroy. "Very well. Arrange the meeting." 3 days later, Zeth Ka found himself in a surreal situation. He stood in a neutral zone established in what had once been Central Park in New York City. Across from him were 3 humans who represented the wilderness resistance. They wore simple clothing that somehow managed to look both primitive and practical. Their weapons were crude projectile devices that should have been no match for hegemony technology. Yet these 3 humans radiated a confidence that made Zeth Ka uncomfortable. They moved with the fluid grace of apex predators, their eyes constantly scanning their environment with an awareness that seemed almost supernatural. "I am General Sarah Reyes," said the human female who appeared to be their leader. "Thank you for agreeing to this meeting. I am Commander Zeth Ka of the Hegemony Occupation Force. Your resistance has been noted, but it cannot continue indefinitely. Surrender now and your forces will be treated with appropriate mercy." General Reyes smiled, an expression that somehow managed to be both friendly and terrifying. "Commander, I think there's been a misunderstanding. We didn't request this meeting to discuss our surrender. We came here to discuss yours." Zeth Ka's mandibles clicked in outrage. "Preposterous! The hegemony has conquered 47 star systems. We rule 1,000 worlds. We will not be defeated by a handful of primitive tree dwellers." "Commander," said the human male, standing beside Reyes, "my name is Colonel James Harrison. I've been fighting in jungles for 30 years. Would you like to know what I've learned in that time? Speak your piece. Jungle warfare isn't about having the biggest guns or the most advanced technology. It's about understanding the environment so completely that you become part of it. It's about patience, adaptability, and using your enemy's strengths against them. Your point? Your forces are designed for conventional warfare in civilized environments. Straight lines of advance, clear fields of fire, reliable supply lines, predictable terrain. But wilderness combat follows different rules, rules that your people have never learned. The third human, a younger female with the calloused hands of someone who lived rough, stepped forward. Commander, your troops are dying from diseases they can't fight, injuries they don't know how to treat, and psychological stress they weren't trained to handle. Our people have been dealing with these challenges since before we discovered fire. Zethka studied these three humans with growing unease. They spoke with the casual confidence of apex predators discussing their prey. There was no bravado in their voices, no desperate defiance, just the matter-of-fact certainty of professionals explaining technical realities. "What are your terms?" he asked finally. "Complete withdrawal of all hegemony forces from Earth," General Reyes replied immediately. "Return of all captured human personnel and stolen resources. Recognition of Earth as an independent world under human sovereignty." "Impossible. The hegemony does not negotiate with conquered species." Colonel Harrison exchanged glances with his companions. "Commander, I don't think you understand your situation. Your forces control the cities because we allow you to control the cities. Every supply convoy, every patrol, every reinforcement that moves through wilderness terrain does so at our discretion." "You're bluffing." The young female touched a device on her belt. Suddenly, Zethka's personal communicator erupted with urgent transmissions from across the planet. "All units in Amazon Basin report heavy contact. Crimson Legion forces in Siberian wilderness requesting immediate evacuation. Supply convoy to Australian garrison is 3 hours overdue. Mountain Division in the Himalayas is reporting complete communication blackout." The voices continued for several minutes, painting a picture of coordinated attacks across every wilderness zone on Earth, attacks that had clearly been timed to coincide with this meeting. General Reyes smiled again. "Commander, this is just a demonstration, a small sample of what we can do when we coordinate our efforts. Right now, every hegemony position on Earth is under simultaneous attack by forces you can't see, can't track, and can't defeat." Zethka realized with horror that he was listening to the systematic destruction of his entire occupation force. Forces that had been scattered across multiple continents were being hit at precisely the same moment by an enemy that seemed to be everywhere at once. "How is this possible? How are you coordinating attacks across such vast distances?" "Drum networks," Harrison replied simply. "Message fires, animal calls, techniques that predate your technology by thousands of years. Communication methods that your sensors can't detect because they're not electronic. But that would require perfect knowledge of terrain across multiple continents, training in environments that span different climates and ecosystems, organizational capabilities that—" Zethka stopped speaking as the full implications hit him. He was facing an enemy that had spent millennia learning to fight in every possible natural environment. An enemy that possessed skills and knowledge that couldn't be acquired through technology or quick training. "You've been preparing for this war for your entire species' existence," he whispered. "Not preparing for war," the young female corrected. "Preparing to live in places where others couldn't survive. The war is just an application of skills we already possessed." The communicator continued broadcasting reports of hegemony defeats across the planet. Elite units that had conquered star systems were being systematically eliminated by humans who fought like forces of nature itself. "Your terms," Zethka said quietly. "Complete withdrawal within 30 days, General Reyes replied. "Full recognition of Earth's independence. and a promise that the hegemony will never again attempt to conquest a world without first understanding what you're really facing. And if we refuse? Colonel Harrison's expression became deadly serious. Commander, we've been holding back. Everything you've seen so far has been small-scale operations designed to avoid unnecessary casualties. If you force us to full-scale warfare, your forces won't survive the month. Zeth-Ka looked around the neutral zone, seeing it with new eyes. The carefully maintained vegetation, the precise positioning of natural features, the subtle signs that every aspect of this environment had been shaped and controlled by human design. Even this meeting place was a demonstration of capabilities he was only beginning to understand. The humans hadn't just defeated his forces in wilderness combat. They had turned the entire planet into a weapon that could be wielded with surgical precision or devastating totality, depending on their needs. "I will convey your terms to High Command," he said finally. "You do that," General Reyes replied. "But understand something, Commander. This isn't a negotiation. This is us being polite enough to give you the option of leaving peacefully." As Zeth-Ka returned to his command ship, he carried with him the knowledge that the hegemony had encountered something unprecedented. Not just another species to be conquered, but a form of warfare they were fundamentally incapable of countering. The humans had shown mercy by allowing the possibility of withdrawal. But if that mercy was refused, Zeth-Ka knew with absolute certainty that his forces would face total annihilation at the hands of jungle warriors who fought like the very spirit of the wilderness made flesh. For the first time in hegemony history, the invaders would be the ones surrendering.